Today I'm going to cook tempura of seafood for you. Now you might think this is a really tricky one to do, Japanese of course, but it is actually very simple. The secret of it really is to use small pieces of really fresh seafood, but the batter, it needs to be so thin that you can almost see the fish through it, but also crisp at the same time. And the way I do that, and I picked this up in Japan, funnily enough, is I use corn flour as well as flour in the batter, and I also use fizzy water, ice cold fizzy water. So let's begin by just having a look at the fish. I've got some prawns here. I've got one scallop. I'm just doing enough for about 2 people. The tip I got from the Japanese chef who I was actually working with at the time, or rather actually watching him in awe as he was so good at making tempura, was not only keep making up fresh lots of batter, but fry everything in small quantities and just keep sending it out. So I've just got a bit of squid here, which I'm going to cut into rings. And I've got some salmon, so my fish is ready. Now I'm just going to make the simplest of dipping sauces, which is just spring onions, ginger and soy sauce, and that's fine, that's just enough, but it's very nice tempura. You want that little bit of extra interest in dipping sauce. So just cutting these spring onions into little slices, that's enough. And then just a tiny little dice of ginger, just a couple of slices of ginger, then the thin slices into little matchsticks, and then the matchsticks into little dice. So that's where your dry ingredients we like. And now just make that up with plenty of Kikkoman soy sauce. So there's my dipping sauce ready to go. I'm just going to check my oil now. It needs to be about 190 degrees centigrade. The old-fashioned way of checking whether oil was ready was just simply to drop in a little cube of bread, and you knew the oil was hot enough when it came back to the surface really quickly and started crisping up. Not quite there yet, so while that's coming up to heat, I will make my batter. So I've got my corn flour and my flour, and I sift those through, because the point of sifting through with a sieve is just to aerate the flour, get as much air in there as possible. There we go. Now I'll just put a little bit of salt in there, and then I've got here about 60 grams of each of flour and corn flour. So I'll probably go about 150 millilitres of fizzy water. As I said, what I want is a really thin batter. So I always like to sort of, when I'm making batters, tell people what sort of consistency, and this would be a single cream, I would say, very creamy milk. Okay, that's nice, really quite thin. Good, well that's about the right temperature. It needs to be about 180 to 190 degrees, and that's so that things cook really crisply and quickly. If you're using big bits of fish, you want a much lower temperature, about 150 degrees. This is all centigrade, but for this quick fry stuff, 190 is best. So I'm just going to now test a squid ring just to see whether the batter is the right thickness. That's looking good. It's really cooking quickly. So that'll take about a minute to cook. Really important point about doing tempura, don't overcook it. You don't want brown colour in it. It really just wants to be a bit off-white. So let's have a look at that now. That's really nice. That's what I mean by, not brown. Perfect. That is a bit hot though. You can see the fish in there, but it's also got a nice crisp bit of batter. Can you hear that crunch? Right, let's get on with it. I'm going to cook this in 2 batches, and I'm going to put bits of everything in there, because as soon as the first lot's cooked, it'll go out to the table to be consumed. And that is about as big enough a batch, certainly for this amount of oil. The more you add, of course, the more you drop the temperature of the oil. And I have to say, when I watch the Japanese chefs cooking, even with their professionalism, what was noticeable with the tempura was that though they were standing right near to the fryer, there was a trail of batter between where the bowl was and where the fryer was, which is is exactly what's happening to me. So that's enough now. Give that a bit of a stir. Obviously, if you've got a deep fat fryer, great, but in this case, and this is one of the other reasons why I really like doing tempura at home, you don't actually need a fry, you can just do it with a small amount of oil. Look at that, eh? Because you can only use this oil like for doing deep frying tempura. Once you've fried it once, it'll do for nothing else. I hope you can see that. That's exactly what I mean by being able to see through. So now we put the next lot in. Just give the oil a little bit more of time to heat up. Just have a quick check. Do this because, as I said, as soon as you put cold or even at room temperature fish into a fryer, it'll drop the temperature. And if you don't fry at the correct temperature, which in this case is about 180, 190 degrees, you won't get that lovely crisp finish. Okay, we're ready to go with the second batch. It doesn't matter what order you put the fish in, they'll all cook because they're all cut about the same size. So you cook these for about a minute, minute and a half. How do you know when they're ready? Yes, that's a difficult one. What I'm looking for is first that all the fish floats on top of the oil. Secondly, I'm looking for the colour, and it's just got to be a sort of beige, a very light brown. And thirdly, and I have to say this to you, and it's a bit of a chefy thing to say, but you can actually tell by the noise of the bubbles when things are ready to take out. The bubbles sort of slacken off a bit, and that's simply because all the moisture in the batter and in the surface of the bits of seafood you got in there, all the water is boiled off, and therefore the bubbles decrease. Okay, there we go. And I just hope that by looking at what I'm doing, you might be inclined to do this yourself, because nothing, I think if you take something like fish and chips, nothing to the average person, I think, is more delightfully tasty than tempura, than fish in a very, very light batter. Can you hear the change of the oil there now? It's just getting a little bit sort of more frenetic, less sort of, less bubbly, more like little pinpoints of water. So there we are, that's ready to serve up. I must say I'm quite itching to reach over and try a bit. Perhaps I will. Lovely.